including all small businesses, large government contractors, nonprofit organizations, etc. You may freely share this content. I only ask that you reference the HUBZone Chamber and me as the source. Today's panel is from the United States Air Force. We have panelists representing different bases and buying patterns, which is great. Our panelists in this session are Della Simmons, a full-time small business professional up in Alaska, Mark Snyder, the Director of Business Operations on Sheppard Air Force Base, and Tracy Nicholson, Director of Tinker Air Force Base's Small Business Office. She's actually out of Oklahoma, the birthplace of the HUBZone Chamber of Commerce. We're very lucky to have a panel with diverse areas of responsibility who are going to provide us with some great tips. Sit back and get ready to meet these Air Force experts.
Okay, great. Before we get started with the panel, maybe we can start with a quick introduction, self-introduction of our panel, beginning maybe, Mark, with you at the top in my video here. Mark, and then Tracy, and then Della will come back to you for an introduction. So, Mark, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Mark Snyder. I work as the Director of Business Operations at the 82nd Contracting Squadron at Sheppard Air Force Base, and I'm also a small business specialist.
Hi, I'm Tracy Nicholson. I'm the Air Force Sustainment Center Small Business Director located at Tinker Air Force Base, but we also have centers at Robins Air Force Base, Georgia, and Hill Air Force Base, Utah.
Hi, I'm Della Simmons. I am one of the full-time small business professional here in Alaska, Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson, and we follow through under PACF and the FICA KH folks.
Great, thanks. Della, welcome from Alaska. We just did another interview with a bunch of folks from Alaska, so I think Alaska's getting some good representation on these panels. So we're going to move into, we have these typical three phases we go through on a session: mission priorities, procurement trends, and then market research. And I wanted to start with mission priorities. And the reason I talk about this is because a big piece of advice from you and your peers for us small businesses is to make sure that we're doing our homework. You don't like it when we come and we're unprepared. And so part of that homework is understanding not just mission priorities, go to our website, see what we do, but it's also about understanding what FY19 priorities might be there. And sometimes there's certain things, whether it's specific projects related to mission or whether it's improvement type goals that the government has. Mark, maybe if we start with you again from the Air Force standpoint, what kind of mission priorities are out there that we should be paying attention to for FY19?
I think it depends on the buying activity that you're seeking to go to. Like my office, we support a training activity. Others buy weapon systems. Others have support requirements.
Okay.
We support a base. So each organization can have its unique requirements that are generated from their customers.
Is there a type of priority that happens in Sheppard for like you said, training, for example? What's the training that's going on? And, are there certain metrics that you all are trying to achieve that, we as small businesses, when we come in, we should be focused on saying, oh, we want to help you get to this next level that you're trying to get to?
As far as training, it's more, we have two types of trainings on Sheppard Air Force Base. We have a pilot training mission, and we also have the technicians for maintaining the aircraft mission. The metrics are more based on at the base for training the students. As far as small business, my leadership tends to focus on as a small business, their capabilities on what can you do to satisfy our mission requirements at a reasonable cost.
Okay, so it's a lot more along the lines of mission requirements. What about in Tinker, when we look at what's going on out there in Oklahoma and some of the other places you support, Tracy? Do you guys have mission priorities that you're hearing down from the Air Force? And then maybe also what's your guys' specialty out there?
We have a wide range of gamuts here. So again, Air Force priorities, delivering the combat power. We're here to accelerate the global logistics integration, shape our future logistics capability, drive cost conscious culture, and develop and support our airmen for tomorrow's Air Force. So again, that's a lot of information. But we also support the Air Force Sustainment Center. We support the Air Force Life Cycle Management Center, as well as the Air Force Nuclear Weapons Center. So that's under the umbrella of the MATCHCOM of Air Force Materiel Command, stationed out of headquarters at Wright-Patt Air Force Base. So again, cover a lot. So in FY17, our small business specialist actually reviewed acquisitions that actually awarded $11.7 billion in FY17. So of those, that obligations, $1.3 billion went to small businesses. So again, our small business specialists are doing a great job of working with our customers, our requiring owners, to ensure that we get those small businesses our goals. And we have actually met our goals for the Air Force Sustainment Center for the last 4 years. And in HUBZones, we've met those in the last 2 years. So again, it's a team effort for all of us to work together. And I think whether you said it or whether Mark said it, made a comment earlier, that we really got to understand the capabilities of the HUBZone small businesses. They've got to share their capabilities extensively with us, not just saying, hey, I'm a HUBZone, I can do it. We need to know your capabilities. Talk to your capabilities. Talk to what you can bring to the warfighter to support our missions.
Yeah, and I'll talk more about that in a minute as we go into the market research stuff and what you're really looking to see back from small businesses. I did want to just pull a thread a little bit on, you were talking about some of these, let's say, mission priorities, and it's exactly kind of the stuff I'm trying to teach small businesses, is that you talked about the first one you said was deliver combat power, and then you went into a couple of these other ones as well. And first off, are those like what you just read? It looks like you were kind of, you had some prepared notes, which is great. Are those certain things that, like, when I think about, when they tell me to do my homework, and as a small business, I always feel like I'm not understood in the sense that you have no idea what I'm up to. I got this, I got this, I got this. It's a large, when you say do a homework, there's one person whose dedicated job is tinker and understanding or something. But small is I got to take the trash out, then I'll come back and do homework. And is there a simple place I can go to do that initial homework of understanding those priorities you just read? Even that first part, like, is there a strategic document that's where that comes from, or?
There is. I am reading from a briefing per se, but should be out there on our Air Force Sustainment website on what we're about. So again, going to the top level websites. For the Air Force. So again, but for the Air Force Sustainment Center, we've got the base itself. So for the HUBZone, I would think that a lot of our acquisitions that supports the bases at Tinker Air Force Base, Robbins Air Force Base, Georgia, and Hill Air Force Base, Utah, that it's kind of like the little city inside the big city. It's we're the mayor. I mean, everything that keeps that installation running, from telephone services, construction, paving, roofing, we need all that support. So for our weapon systems, we also then need those widgets, those parts that a lot of our manufacturers out there, especially those in the oil industry here in Oklahoma, whenever they too can maybe diversify into government contracting, but the machining, the milling, they need to understand the government requirements, who can buy those items. And then for our major weapon systems, all the Air Force platforms, from the bombers to the cargos to the fighters, we need support in maintaining those aircraft. So we have depot maintenance at each one of the sites. So understanding where your niche is at those locations. And you can do that at FedBizOps, usaspending.gov. Work with your local PTAC reps to help them understand how to research those systems out there.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And we see a lot of that as it relates to like FedBizOps. You're constantly seeing these things come out from the airports on opportunities. So Della, as we shift up into your world in Alaska, and actually I might ask you to expand a little bit more about just who you're supporting, whether it's broader than outside of Alaska or if it's that area. And then up that way, that same kind of question, are there certain priorities that you guys have up there, whether it's, mission priorities like they're talking about from the department level or your organizational level, or deficiency levels, like hey, we're really trying to improve this next year?
Well, here we're 673rd contracting, and we're basically an operational type of basic. So we don't have those big jets. We're right next to the flight line though, and they're there all the time. But we buy everything on base. We support the 11 cons, the security forces, medical. We have a lot of medical buys out there. So we have services, construction, and commodities, and anywhere from opticals we're buying. We don't do design build as of yet. We used to have an AE in our construction side, but that kind of went on the wayside. So we're trying to bring those back to our area. And it's kind of unique here. We do buy everything here. And you're talking HUBZone, we've met our goals pretty well, because one of our projects, which is the Simplified Acquisition-Based Engineering Requirements, SABRE, the acronym for that, in construction, that's awarded to a HUBZone. And here in Alaska, sometimes, especially with the last census they did, it kind of changed the demographics for some of those HUBZone folks. And in Alaska, some of the HUBZones, we can't get to them because they have maybe gravel roads, or they're part of a different native tribe, Alaska Native tribe. So it's kind of a uniqueness to our end of the buying proximity. So, but we do, excuse me, we do well reaching out to them. We're with, of course, PTAC's there helping us a lot, and SBA and the Veteran Center, the mayor participate at their functions. And I'll find out, we have another process of 766 cons. They were part of our contracting office. They're the Alaska radar site, and they're kind of separated from us about 2-3 years ago.
What's cons?
Contracting, 673 contracting.
Oh, okay. But when you say like 11 cons, that's 11 contracting?
Yeah, 11, that was 11 Air Force, and they're basically the command for Pacific Air Force in Guam and Alaska, and also Japan, I think it was. We also support the Army. There, we have in our contracting office, we have some Army military working in our contracting office. So because of joint base, we were able to kind of work together with that. So we do some of our buys, and one of our other bases in Eielson Air Force, and they also kind of basically work the same way, but he's a director of business operation and part-time as a small business person. And they have same problems of reaching out for the smaller HUBZone folks because of the geography of where the people are situated.
Is that also, I mean, just pulling a slight sidetrack thread there for a second, but is that also because they're trying to find companies that are locally based compared to a HUBZone from anywhere in the country, teaming up with a local company there as well?
Well, it depends. It depends on what the project is. Like for the construction that we went to HUBZone, it would have been difficult for a HUBZone from outside to be able to have a contract here, unless they do joint venture with maybe an A-Day or one of the contractors up there, so up here. So we have no problems with that, but often we don't find enough of them with past performance to be able to do some of the contracts up here, because there's different dynamics in here. Up here in Alaska, one of the problems we have is shipping cost. So that's a big thing for us to have to deal with too. So when you're talking about commodity buys or supplies, that could be a hindrance. And some of the other unique things are our construction time period is very short. Our gravel and sand pit area closes down by 1 October. So all of our construction outside construction would have to be done in a short time period, like 3 months.
Yeah, it's funny what you watch on Netflix. I just happened to watch a video about construction in Alaska in that short window that you're talking about. So I'm like, oh yeah, I know all about what you're talking about. If it was 3 weeks ago, I wouldn't have known any of that. But yeah, no, I see that short window up there.
Yeah, and like I said, some of our priorities is basically to support our jet fighters here. And we don't buy the jets, but we do wash airplanes. And we buy one of the unique things, we bought banner towing for target practice in the air. So that's kind of unique in that sense too.
Is the reason you keep, well, I was going to ask, is the reason you keep needing new contracts is because the banner and the tower got?
No.
No.
It's
That's
based
all.
on their need and requirements. So we don't know. Sometimes there's exercises. So the quantity we won't know ahead of time to put the cost factor into a bigger contract.
And that's one of the things I was talking about when I was prepping on the panel, and this idea that although this will be valuable, this video will be valuable to all small businesses, and really all businesses try to work with you. It's especially valuable, I find, for the people who are under that 2 million threshold, even 1 million threshold, who they're still looking at every sale, even the $25,000 sale, is a good sale and an incremental sale forward. And hearing you talk about some of these things, like even washing an airplane, understanding how you might be able to get in there and be competitive on that, where it's harder to be competitive in IT in the Air Force because, that's basically locked down. But understanding how to get in there, and then the teaming is really important.
And we're very open to teaming and mentorship programs or partnership. So we were very open to that because we have a big populace of 8As up here, of course, in Alaska Native 8As. So we're very open to those.
That's perfect. And then, so when we think about Sheppard, Mark, just kind of last couple of minutes on this phase or this section here is, if a small business is there, around the base or nearby and wants to work with that base, especially early on, and I think Tracy was describing this a little bit, is it called base operations in the Air Force as well, where it's that local city support services where IT is somewhere else, right? But everything else is kind of bought locally. Is that the right term, base operations? And then really the bigger question is, when people go in there and do their homework, independent of the PTACs, which we absolutely recommend they should have a relationship with, how do they begin to do the relationship in there to learn about the priorities in there, that homework part?
Like Tracy kind of hinted at, looking on the federal procurement data system, and what NAICS is that contractor, what's their focus. Once you kind of target that, that's where I'd see, if you see like one base that buys a lot of a certain thing that your company provides, that's where you start to target. Like we don't, like Della said that she didn't buy a lot of parts. We buy services that support the maintenance of both the flying aircraft, and then we have a lot of aircraft that never fly, therefore the students to learn how to maintain. So they pull the engine out, put the engine in, do all those kinds of activities. We had like the development had a target, like the past performance you mentioned before. For example, we have a lot of airfield work on the airfield at Sheppard. One time we put out an RFI and no hub zones came back, and it was like a $5 million project. So we ended up putting it out for 8A. A subcontractor to them was a hub zone and got experience working on the airfield. So when we put out an RFI next time, they came back and said, hey, we got experience now too. And somebody else did, so we had the two, so we put it out for HUBZone after that. But it took the initiative for that contractor to learn how to work on an active airfield to do that.
Yeah, one of my chief pieces of advice on experience is absolutely, I personally believe if you're under $5 million, you should be subcontracting almost the whole time, because you can get so much experience. Clearly, there's a flexible threshold there, but the reality is you can build a really successful company as a subcontractor, get the experience, and now you can really get documented past performance, and then move forward without the burden of priming early on, building the relationships, like you all say, and building the trust. Maybe we slide into the procurement trends, because when we look at FY19, for small businesses, and this is it is very confusing in the government contracting. This is one of my favorite pieces of advice that I hear is you need to understand the FAR. I'm like, the people whose job is to write the FAR don't even understand the FAR. Like, it is such a complex thing. And when I get a few seconds, I will pause and understand the FAR. What I really need to understand about the FAR is all the things that are applicable to me, for sure. But same thing with vehicles, right? sometimes people talk about vehicles and they talk about it from a big business standpoint where everybody knows acronyms, everybody knows all these things. But I do a lot of work with small businesses, and just saying IDIQ or BPA gets confusing. We're like, wait, what? What's that? And I was like, I'm sorry. It's indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity, not quality, quantity. And then even there, you have to pause and go, well, okay, let me explain what it means. Well, there's a lot of training the government puts out there, but the reality is most of us are small businesses. We start it, we're subject matter experts, we dive in, and then we're busy working in the business instead of on the business. And we continue to try to learn it. But one of the things I was hoping you could share with us, and Tracy, maybe I'll throw this your way to start, is about vehicles, especially vehicles of choice in your area, but also the ones that impact your area. So for example, IT, if I do IT work, well, most of our IT procurement is bought this way or something. When you look at FY19 and you look at the typical way things might be bought on Tinker out there, what are the typical vehicles you would see that any businesses, but small businesses in particular, would have to be riding along in order to win any? And piggybacking on that, could they be awarded anything without a vehicle?
Right. Again, it goes back to that homework. How are we buying the product or service that company is selling? So you say IT, computer related. So the three of us here, I would like to say that we're going to have to be using NetSense because of the mandatory use contracts. So again, FICA, which is the Air Force Installation Contracting Agency, they have a website. I have a link on my website to that because there's a list of all the mandatory contracts out there. So there's lists out there of the mandatory from the paving, the roofing, the modular furniture, NetSense software. There's requirements that we have to follow. So knowing the rules that we have to follow. So if a company is selling something, that product or service, they need to understand what kind of mandatory vehicles are out there. We had a lot of Oasis as a GSA vehicle that were required. On some, I support 3 different centers. The Life Cycle Management Center has made it mandatory that we use Oasis for professional services, ANAS support type contracts. For the Air Force Sustainment Center and the Air Force Nuclear Weapon System, we do not have to use it. It is a priority vehicle that we can go out and use, but it may not be the mandatory use of the other vehicles that we have to use. So again, knowing your customer, knowing who has to buy that product. So again, going back to the dynamic, the Fed Biz Ops, the USA spending, but the procurement data systems, understanding who is buying those products. If you see a particular area, is DLA buying them for the Air Force? We have a lot of support that DLA buys for us. So we have, I'm kind of going off tangent here, but at the same time, I think it brings a point that we have contractors coming up to the general officers saying, sir, I've been selling to Tinker for the last, for the last 15 years, and all of a sudden the last 5 years, boom, it's dried up. I can't get my foot in that door. Well, if they would have done their homework and if they pay attention to the news, they knew that the BRAC decisions, now the throwaway items, the items that we are consumable items are all being bought by DLA, Richmond, Columbus, or Philadelphia. So we're still using them on our depot maintenance floors. It's just that they're being bought by DLA.
Let me pull one thread right there. If I ask you about that, because I get both that we have to do our homework and pay attention to this stuff, and I also get why we don't because we're just so swamped or something, right? And that they're both acceptable. You just have to accept the risk as a small business that you might miss a contract if you don't track it. But if I had been that person who had that contract and went to the general officer, if I had been paying attention to that, would I still be able to win that kind of business with you? Let's say, if I had built relationships, either got on that vehicle myself or like teamed up with somebody who was on that vehicle, so then I could pass it, or do I not even hear about it at the local level anymore and it just bypasses straight to DLA? I don't know if that
so in this particular case that I'm referring to, the gentleman actually was selling his items to DLA. He just wanted to sell them to Tinker, but we are buying those from DLA. We're getting those widgets that he actually sold in their support of our maintenance aircraft. It's just that he didn't understand it. Why can't I sell to you anymore? So again, it's just understanding the dynamics of how we're buying that widget or that service commodity that he might want sold to us.
And I'm sorry, just to drive that one just really quick. So it was as if Tinker, and I'm just kind of helping us do our homework. It's as if Tinker no longer was buying it, and now the government buyer of that particular thing was DLA, and Tinker just got it from DLA. So no matter what you did, you weren't going to sell to Tinker. The new customer is DLA. Okay, so and that goes back to what you said about you need to find out. Somebody else talks about follow the money, but you need to find out who's buying what you sell. So, okay. And thanks for letting me pull that through because it helps get that example out. I figure I'm a fairly smart small business guy, and I just want to be able to get that through. So I saw it. So maybe Della, as we switch kind of staying in this procurement trends, one of the questions I always have is how small businesses who are at that, let's say they're under 500,000, under 250, they're just starting out, right? And they're very competent in what they do. But in the Air Force or more particular up in your neck of the woods, are there things that are under the $25,000 FBO category that is procurable from you guys? And then also maybe expanding that a little bit to the simplified acquisition. What's purchasing trends like in your world for simplified acquisitions?
We do have our card holders, and they buy. They can actually use the card and spend $5,000 on their own, and just go out there and pick those contractors. They don't have to go through anybody else in our contracting office. But that's a threshold to be able to do that. And after that, under 25,000, then it has to be on a contract and above. So that it still has to be a vehicle. They can't just use a car. We have contracting officers now that are warranted to do that over dollar amount that we're buying for the SATs. And a lot of times it's very simple. The SAT is simple than doing a negotiation and you bigger dollar buy contracts.
So two questions on that really quick as you continue. The card holder, I don't know if you said this, and I'm sorry if I missed it, but the 5,000, that sounds like for a lot of the card holders, do they have the ability to go beyond that, or is that a hard stop for Air Force cards?
That 5,000 is for them to be able to reach out to, like going to downtown to the commercial side and picking, buying pens, just as an example, and they don't have to go through the process of being formalized. So you can take their card, go to JCPenney's and want that pen and buy that.
You would just question why they're paying $5,000 for a pen, but
no, but I'm just saying
right.
that they can go to Walmart or Target or any of the stores to pick up whatever supplies they need at that time, whether it's some kind of oil to clean up the vehicles or airplane parts.
No, and let me spread it beyond the 5,000, but up to like the 25,000 limit, because it hits 25, it's got to go FBO. I guess any of you, but especially Della for the moment with you, is it likely that there would be these under $25,000 procurement opportunities for small businesses where they're able to get in and begin to cut their teeth, so to speak, in these what I call mini prime opportunities?
Absolutely. We have training sessions, and myself, way back when I used to do the small business program, and I would brief at the GPC training session for the card holders. So my intent is to make it more transparent and reach out to the small businesses holding those cards to let them know that I have small businesses that they can utilize, as well as just reaching out on their own market research.
Okay, perfect. And Mark, what about over in Sheppard, like from a procurement standpoint? Because we all know of NetSense out there. For some reason, all of us small businesses know that who are in IT. But what about local purchases? When you really are thinking about businesses within a 100 or 200 mile range of Sheppard, and sometimes their first starts are the agencies that are right next to them because it's just easier for them to knock on doors or whatever. What are the opportunities for them in that below the simplified acquisition threshold?
Like Della talked about, that $5,000 is called the micro purchase limit. And then the card holders have opportunities where they don't have to go to specific venues. They don't have to worry about what we call in strategic sourcing. It's now converted into category management, where there's, like Tracy mentioned, we have a lot of venues now that are mandatory for doing roofing and various services, working on the airfield with the painting and things like that, where we are mandated to go use a specific contract vehicle. My problem with that is I don't think that there's near enough small business participation in a lot of those mandatory vehicles. Some of them, they'll say, hey, we had small business participation, and they'll have 19 large businesses and one small business. And I'm like, how is that representative? So I would encourage them, when they have those strategic sources, to come out to pursue that. The other thing too is, like, even NetSense has opportunities for small business to subcontract to the various prime vendors that are on NetSense. And NetSense is not just for like IT buying software or hardware, it's also for system services for developing a system type thing, software development or a system configuration. At Sheppard right now, we're part of the Air Education Training Command, and they're working towards updating training for the Air Force. So a lot of the audio-visual, augmented reality type things that are available in private industry, they're trying to bring to the federal government. Part of the challenge we have is a lot of our customers, they know Microsoft, they know Oracle, they know those guys. They don't know the small businesses. And then it comes on us, we put out a RFI, hey, can anybody do this? We were fortunate that a number of small businesses came forward and said, hey, I can do that. And that was we didn't have to go through NetSense. We got some NetSense waivers on some things. But I would encourage them to look at those RFIs like you mentioned before.
It's interesting. When I started my newest company, it was about Microsoft training, and 2-3 months after I started it, basically that whole opportunity was put out of business for me, in the sense that Microsoft started integrating it into their thing. I was like, hey, I was doing that training. Fortunately, you don't have one thing you live and die by, but it's I see that whole thing where people tend to trust what's large just because it is large, not necessarily because there's any other particular reason. And most of us smalls are coming from working for larges anyway. So the last question I had as it relates to procurement, and Tracy, I don't know if you want to take this one. It's related to the vehicles and us doing our homework, because Mark was talking about, maybe looking at NetSense and getting on those teams, but it is very hard to get on those teams. When you call any of these larges out there, any of these teams, oh, we already got our team. That's like the most common thing. You really do need to build personal relationships. And then all of a sudden those same people are like, oh, yeah, we'll get you on it. And so it's a who you know kind of thing, which makes sense. I mean, it's already established, so they don't need to be dealing with thousands of us who are coming last minute after they've already won it. But one of the things I'm curious about is how a lot of us who are watching this video, how we can prepare going forward. And this goes directly into the homework that you're telling us to do. And so if you give me kind of specific advice of how I can track new vehicles, like how do I know what's coming out and when it's coming out? Does that question make sense?
Yes. And Della or Mark, you might be able to help me out too. But if I'm not mistaken, the FICA website has a list of those mandatory use contracts that the Air Force installation contracting that we're all required to use.
Yes.
So it's a public site. So pay attention to those. Visit all of our websites. We all have good information on them.
Yeah, we're going to have those linked in on the websites. It's FICA, you're saying, right?
Yeah.
FICA.
So we'll add those as links as well, because that's something that's really helpful. And I guess it makes sense. I shouldn't, as a small business, be looking for brand new vehicles. I should be looking for these existing vehicles, which is how the government buys, and doing my homework to find out when they're going to be open again for recompete or scaling up or any of that stuff. Okay. And do you think they might have those dates in there, or that just requires more homework somewhere else? And I could probably find that out myself, but
I would say the dates are in there, but I don't know that for a fact.
Okay.
A lot of times in Alaska, we're exempt from some of those programs they have, like roofing and things for Hawaii and Alaska. There's a couple of them that we are exempt from. There was one for furniture, and we were exempt from that also. So, like I said, you have to look at it, do your homework, and see who's it's applicable to.
No, that's good news though, because I would be talking about how, hey, we have these vehicles. Just because you said that, Della, there's all sorts of people in the Pacific Ocean that we're supporting as well to say, hey, you should check, because even though this is a hard and fast rule, where you're at, it might be, there might be exceptions in there, so track it out. Okay, so let's move on into market research, which is one of my favorite things, because I like to describe market research with you all and with the federal government, similar to Wayne Gretzky, the hockey player who talks about how to be a good skater. He talks about don't skate where the puck is, skate to where the puck's going to be. And it's the same thing in market research. You want to be where the federal buyer is doing their market research. And if you're not there, they're not going to find you, kind of thing. And so in this next 15 minutes or so, 10, 15 minutes we have, I'd like to chat about some things along that line and get your guidance on the market research. And Della, we might start with you just on when you think about market research, what's the typical approach, and especially in your world, not necessarily the whole Air Force, right? Up in Alaska and covering the Pacific Ocean, what's the typical approach for trying to find small businesses that could do the work during market research?
We use the dynamic small business search. That's one area, and it ties in also with SAMS, which is the contractor needs to register in that, or we can't award any contracts to them. And one of the other areas too, one of the questions that was in there is that how does this, program managers get their market research? Well, one of the things our civil engineers do to get estimates and what they need to do, they use a construction cost text catalog, and there's a program they tie in with that's called eGordian program. So that's one part on their part where they reach their numbers, then they'll bring it back to the buying team, and they will follow through with the dynamic small business search and through SAMS. That's one of the basic tools that we use for market research. And of course, myself, I review all projects over $10,000, and I have my capability listing and logins. We have a share file that I'm working with to make the program more transparent, so they could, the Squadron can use it as an additional market research for all the contractors that come to see me, or I do one-on-one at industry days. That's available out there. So I participate in, like I said earlier, the mayor's fiscal year, the 8A program, and PTAC, whatever, PTAC and SBA supports. I am a participant in that because it's more difficult to do an industry day on base for security reasons and for the area where I'm at.
Yeah, it's actually I think it's difficult for so many people, especially if you have a whole bunch of people coming in who don't necessarily have base clearance or something. Okay, so DSBS, and you were saying that's interesting. The program office or the civil engineers are the ones who are doing that. They're doing their own cost estimate so that they can balance it. Okay.
Exactly. We tie in with them because I think one of the questions was how did they come along with that, their numbers, I think.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. That's perfect.
Market research. So that we team up pretty well. We train our engineers and our customers. We actually have a team that goes around base to train them on what contracting processes that we need to do. So,
oh, that's great. So they kind of see the process to follow that fits in.
Exactly.
Mark, out in Sheppard, how does market research happen? And actually maybe a little bit right of the process of buying, because it's different with every federal agency. I'm talking to civilian agencies or DOD agencies, and sometimes it's a little different. But, when you look at Sheppard, is there a lot of strategic research and tactical research happening? And I don't know if you guys use those terms, but strategic being, like you described, that opportunity that's a little more innovative for audiovisual and things like that. To me, that's more strategic in the sense that this is the direction we're going compared to this is the opportunity we have. market research?
I would say the majority of our market research is tactical. At an operational level on base, the engineers tend to be our program managers for construction, but other things, we don't necessarily have full-time project managers or program managers. They're the customer that needs some piece of equipment or some service. And like Della said, we go out and train our customers as well. Some people are more adept at it than others. Then our contracting folks go out and do market research as well. They try and do it as a team, but sometimes the contracting ends up bearing the load of the market research. We also use the Small Business Dynamics, Small Business Search, SAM. The finance has a EDA, and I can't remember what that acronym stands for, but we can go in and look for contracts that are awarded at other organizations and take a look and see what kinds of things that they had in those contracts to incorporate in ours, maybe like a lesson learned. Sometimes the wording, the way they require, we have a similar requirement, but we're not wording it. Like, for example, on Sheppard, we have a large student population. They're basically stuck on Sheppard Air Force Base for the most time. So we have a big washer and dryer contract. Part of that contract is to clean out the ducts in those washer and dryer facilities. Those ducts are long throughout the facility, and they're hard to clean. Market research, we had a number of small businesses that really were challenged to do that. And we didn't, as the government, we didn't explain that requirement very well. And market research and lessons learned, we found out that there's agencies that train companies how to clean out commercial washer and dryer ducts. And so we put those kind of requirements, hey, you need to be certified by this place to learn how to do it. And the performance dramatically changed because we were able to capture what the requirement was more fully.
No, that makes total sense. And those are the kind of certifications I like seeing in. Like, we'll see Microsoft Gold, for example, and it didn't really add value even, that's argumentable. But what you're describing goes directly to a performance type issue, which also makes it clear for us going, oh, if I need that certification, maybe I need to team up with somebody who has it or whatever. As you do market research, Tracy, what level of and maybe an example of influence can small businesses have in that sources sought market research phase to begin to talk about even something like what Mark just said, right? Hey, I think this should probably have this long duct certification thing in there. What kind of influence do small businesses have in there? And really, I think I'm asking a leading question in the sense of you sharing what small businesses should be thinking about when they respond to the sources sought phase.
Spot on. I personally think we don't really do a great job in our sources sought synopsis and asking the businesses what we want. Sometimes it may, well, if I can't do it, that I don't respond. It's so important that a small business, if they see a larger project and they may not be able to do the whole thing, but they can do segments of it, to share that information with us so that if we necessarily can't set it aside to a small business or a HUBZone, that we could potentially then up our, help support our subcontracting goals in the larger acquisitions. So that gets their foot in the door so that they can do the performance. They have good performance, and then that might lead on to larger contracts in the end. But even if we may not say it correctly or well in our sources sought synopsis, if a small business out there can perform a portion of it, let us know what. Tell the contracting office, work those industry days, because the more information you can share with us, your capabilities, then we'll be your advocate to help them to help mold the acquisition strategy, whether it's a full up set aside, a partial set aside, or do we break part of it out? We've had recent acquisitions here at in the Sustainment Center where the kitting of a large $100 million contract, a portion of it was taken out to set aside for small business instead of leaving it all together. So again, help us help you. Let us be your advocate, but you got to give us substantial data to show that you are capable of performing those segments of that acquisition.
I just used that same phrase the other day. Help me help you. And it really is, to me, the whole purpose of sources sought response is that the more we share with you, the more you can, it's the whole point of sources sought. It's not a award. We're trying to figure out the direction. You said something I just want to expand a little bit on. We can decide to up our subcontracting goal. Can you expand a little bit about what you mean when you talk about that? I'm assuming you're talking about like a larger contract, full and open or something, that you have a goal in there. Can you explain a little bit about that?
So if we do have a OEM or a single source, or it could be a source selection, full and open, but we have percentages we put in subcontracting goals at the socioeconomic categories. So again, by sharing with us what you could actually do, if there's more of them, then we could potentially increase our percentages in the final contract, the RFP that goes out. So it will help them gain the experience and support of the warfighter in the end by supporting us.
Yeah, no, and that's perfect. And that's actually a whole separate panel I might have one day is really talking about how smalls can understand some of these subcontracting goals. Because again, a lot of us don't really know about it, but if we know about it, then we can go in and talk to the largest or whoever's going after these larger contracts and say, we can help you with this. And it makes you more competitive when you're going after the win kind of thing, compared to just saying, I do SharePoint or whatever. So. And
every base has different goals. I mean, my goal here for the sustainment center may be 30%, where Mark, more at the his 82nd cons, may be a higher percentage just because he has more small business friendly work than what we do. I may have a lot of dollars that go to small business, but his percentages are higher, mine's lower. But depending on that specific acquisition that we're awarding, help us help you by making, supporting those higher goals, subcontracting goals, and socioeconomic goals in our contracts.
Well, and I like, and I might be stealing this from you in the next question I'm about to ask, but I like that thing about tell us what you can do inside of a larger piece of work, and it helps us decide how to move forward. So that's great. We got about 3, 4, 5 minutes left here about on this panel, and I wanted to end with kind of a round robin here, and Mark, maybe I'll start with you, and then Della, and then Tracy, about you guys have so much experience working with smalls. And when you think about just market research, not everything in general, but just market research, do you have either or a best practice to follow or something to avoid doing ever again for small businesses? That last piece of advice that, as we're doing market research, what advice would that be from you,
Mark? The ones that I work at a training base, we don't buy aircraft weapon systems. And I've had folks come in. I had a guy that came in one time, and his company developed weapons satellite targeting system. It could have been the best one in the world, but we've never bought that ever. And so, Tracy said, "Help us help you." What do you do? And then know where you're going. The other thing a good thing on market research is a lot of times I get emails from contractors. I've seen the various ones that kind of say, oh yeah, I'm an 8A or whatever. The ones that I remember the most, as they come in, they'll say, I do this. I call it a unique product statement. I do this great. And then they say, hey, I'm HUBZone, I'm 8A, I'm woman owned, I'm whatever. But right out the gate, they say, this is what I do. I do this better than anybody else. That sticks with me. And that would be my recommendation.
No, that's great advice. And then take that and put it right in your DSBS capability narrative, because it sounds like such good advice. Della, how about yourself?
Okay. One of the things when we're doing market research and when we're looking at the dynamic search, and contractors do not put the correct information or the data into those forms. They'll leave the description of what they're doing blank. I'm going to tell you right away, if it's blank, we're not even looking at those. We don't have that time to have to research and pull back more details to find out who you are and what you do. And sometimes too, you see in those description blocks of the capabilities that they can do everything. And that's not what we're looking for either. Be a little bit more specific, but if you know what you're looking for, who your customer is that you're going to, then you can, detail your capabilities to what you're looking for and what opportunities you're reaching out to.
I need to build my list of top 10 pieces of advice, and one of them is never ever say you can do everything, because that's something we smalls, even the bigs don't say they do everything, but the smalls, for some reason, me and my two people, we can do everything. Okay, and then Tracy, some advice you might leave with us?
Ditto from what Mark and Della have said, but again, the dynamic small, the keywords, we all use it, all the services, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, we all use it. So again, be mindful of what the Air Force may call a widget or a service versus what the Army and the Navy, we may all do the same thing, but we all have different adjectives or acronyms that we use. So you've got to populate that keyword, because if you don't keep those keywords populated, you won't come up in my top 200 list. So you've got to keep those keywords current. And then, as Della said, then whenever you do pop up, but I have a list of 200, if you don't have anything in your capabilities, if we don't have time to do additional research, we want it quick and easy. So you've got to keep the dynamic small up to date and respond to those RFIs and the sources sought. You've got, as Mark said, with what you can do, not, hey, I'm an 8A or hey, I'm a HUBZone, whatnot. You've got to respond to your capabilities. Sell us on your capabilities, and oh, by the way, now I'm an 8A or a HUBZone, and now you're making us happy, and we can really potentially work with our operations support and find some niches there for that particular company. But a lot of times we don't have to do our sources soughts with our 8A requirements in the operation. If we're doing some construction projects here at the end of the fiscal year, we need to quickly, easily find you. So that dynamic small is one of the first places that our contracting officers are requiring folks, as well as the small business office uses. So it is important.
Yeah, I really appreciate that tip too, Tracy, because I consider myself an expert on DSBS, but I hadn't thought of what you just said, which is I really appreciate, of this idea that what I might call it for the Army is different than what the Air Force might call it, and to do a little bit of homework to just make sure I'm communicating it the way you search for it, not the way I think you should search for it. So thanks for that tip. Yeah.
And they can find that in the Federal Procurement Data System, and it's open to everybody. So again, going out there, learning how to filter the Federal Procurement Data System. And again, PTACs, here in Oklahoma, we are spoiled. Our PTAC reps, they know, they train our folks on it, the contractors. So take advantage of those free training sessions that are being offered.
It's funny, if I keep these panels dropping the way I'm recording them, then the PTAC is the very next panel. We're actually